You know those moments in life when the stress starts to build? Your mind fixates on the problems and it creates this never ending loop, looking at the problem, trying to find the solution as the anxiety builds in your body. And it's just like so noisy in your head. You start to ask yourself, how do I step out of this stressful part of my mind to just have some peace, to just have some silence? Well, if you're asking yourself these questions, you and I need to have a coffee and a conversation because I love to talk about the language of stress and what it's trying to tell you. When you understand what the stress is trying to signal within you, then you're now empowered to take action and to create that peace and to create that ease in your life. Today, I want to focus on the ego. I want to focus on how the ego hooks onto stress, why it's doing that, and what you can do about it so that you can take notice when the ego wants the upper hand, and therefore you're now in the position to be able to change the outcome, to be able to create that peace. Now, the ego itself is a complex kind of conversation. It carries with it a lot of confusion because so many people throw around that word, like they're very egotistical or they've got a big ego. And yet, not many people can actually clearly label what is the ego. I've definitely been on that quest to understand struggle, stress. And from my teenagehood being in a really dark place, I wanted to understand the mind. I wanted to understand, is it connected to my soul? Is it connected to past lives? Is the stress connected to trauma? Like, where is this stress and struggle coming from? Because so many people out there seem to have it all together. They seem to know what to do to feel good and to live an easy life. And that particular journey took me on a path to explore things like energy healing, spirituality, how to raise your consciousness, holistic counseling, hypnotherapy, NLP, gosh, all of the different things. And they all have their place. They all provide a piece of the puzzle. But one of those pieces of the puzzle is understanding, again, the ego. Now, the ego is that part of you that holds onto your identity, your sense of self, who you are and who you are not. And the ego itself is like a mental construct. It is part of the mind and it likes to ensure your survival. It doesn't want you to die because then it can't exist. It thinks it's its separate entity, like it thinks that it's got control over you. And it knows that if it can generate that need for individuality, then it can get you to take action. It can drive you to matter, to be significant. And the other thing with the ego is that it also wants to belong. It seems to understand that when you're part of a group or a tribe, that you have the backup, that you have the extra oomph you need to survive. And so the ego itself is like a paradox because on one hand, it wants you to be that individual self, and yet on the other hand, it fears separation. So it's a lifelong battle between, who are you, what makes you important, and also how do you belong. So again, it can be an interesting conversation, right? When we look at that part of you that wants to be, that individual, that unique, important self, this can shine out in ways that drive you to be the best. It'll drive people to win the awards, whether it's awards for writing books or the sportsman on the field. The ego in itself wants to drive you to be important and to matter. And again, whether you're looking for the numbers on your social media to reflect that you are important, or you're looking at wearing the designer labels, or even wanting to be that really potent healer and like the best in the industry for your mediumship, or, the politician, the CEO. This is an undercurrent of the ego. Again, ensuring your survival, creating that motivation to be the best, to have that significance. And the other side of the ego, if it can't have that inflated sense of self, then what it will do is it'll generate the I matter significance through trauma through needing attention to heal. It's a challenging conversation to have, because those people who find themselves in a bit of a loop with their healing journey, physical problems, needing everybody to focus on them so they get better. Some of this is the ego playing out, that they found a way to, again, matter, to get attention, to be significant. And if you think about, I think about my own mum and her journey right from when she was little. She was adopted. And when when there was a biological child that came into the picture, my grandmother put a lot of her attention onto the other child, the biological one, or the biological grandchild, I should say. And so this is where my mum started to generate being sick in all different kinds of ways. And so Nana was then required, instead of the special one, the biological child, according to my Nana, she would now focus on mum and her sickness and what we can do to make sure that she survives. So it is a strategy that the ego will create that self-importance, either through that boldness and the bravado of competition and standing out and being the best, and also being the most generous, or being the most one who's gone through trauma, or even being the one who's got all of the answers. This is all driven by the ego. It's neither good nor bad, but when you understand the oomph and the power that's holding that in place, it's like, that's a bit interesting. The other thing that the ego does is that it wants to, again, belong. It fears that separation. And so the ego will drive up all sorts of insecurities, the stress, the struggle, the anxiety, fixating on the problems, when it picks up on the potential being isolated from the group, the separation, the criticism, anything that threatens its reputation or your reputation. When we think about that, it would rather remove the person who is threatening their reputation, like get them out of your world, versus actually having that conflict and coming to that point of agreement to get on the same page. So the ego in itself is quite insecure in wanting and needing to be part of the group, people pleasing, letting go of your values or what's important to you for that oomph and the importance to belong. And it will also pick up on the threat that if somebody else seems better or more important, they may push that person out of the group. And it's like, again, more ego games. The ego is quite complex, right? But hold on to the knowing that the ego wants that individuality and that significance. And the ego also wants to belong, or doesn't want that separation, I should say. So those are the two ruling things that you need to hold on to when we unpack this. Now, the ego. The ego itself, everybody has an ego, but you were not necessarily born with an ego. Hear me out on this. When it comes to understanding how we raise our consciousness, when you are born, or when you're in the womb, I should say, you within your consciousness hold on to that mental construct that you are your mum is you, and that you are one being, one entity. And so all of your survival is based on your mum providing that for you. So you don't need to change who you are. You don't need to stand out. You don't need to be important or matter, because that's already been taken care of. As you start to grow up and become that toddler and start to recognize within your consciousness that you are separate to mum, this is when the ego really takes hold and really blooms. So think about that toddler in your life, the one who, recognizes like, this is mine, and they will almost fight for that this is mine. And then they will run to their mother for reassurance that that there isn't any separation anxiety, like, yes, I still belong. So again, there's this battle here as you grow up to like, how do I have my individuality? How do I matter? And how do I belong? How do I get their attention? Again, for that survival. The thing with the ego, as I'm unpacking this, is you need to keep in mind that it will do everything it can so that you as the body does not die, as black and white as that is. So it's going to make sure that it drives up things like fear of the unknown, so you stay safe, with the tribe. The shame of, needing to meet up to everybody's expectations, again, so you belong, so you're not criticized, so your reputation isn't threatened. The frustration that you may feel about, knowing where you want to go, and yet there's all of these beliefs holding you back, which are typically beliefs from the past, how you should be versus, separation, individuality, being out there on your own terms. I could go on with the list, but again, keeping in mind the ego is part of that mental construct. It is going to create mental construct type experiences like anxiety, like depression, like all of this mental health kind of concerns. We've got this push-pull again, individuality and belonging. Anxiety in a nutshell, this is all about, knowing that somewhere in your past you were on your merry way, a shock or the rug got pulled out from underneath you. The ego, the unconscious mind says, never again will I be on my merry way. Never again will I just be calm and easygoing, because big deal things can happen. And now I need to be on alert in the future for the worst case scenario, all of the problems that can come up. And depression. Depression is worries and hopelessness based on patterns of the past, where you've been told by other people how to belong, how to have that security with the material items, and yet never really feeling fulfilled that gives you what you're after. So now I want you to focus on time. The anxiety, the depression, the limiting emotions that we're feeling are all based on insecurity of the past and based on insecurity in the future. Hold on to that, because this is when the ego is operating. So important to know. So important to know. If you are feeling stress, it tells us that you're worried or insecure about the future, or worried and insecure about the pain of the past. You are completely out of this present moment where you are fine. So the present moment represents that soulful connection that you have with your intuition, with your higher self, in this present moment when you can look around and have appreciation for good things around you, good opportunities around you, good health or not good health, but, being able to breathe in fresh air. In this present moment, the ego cannot take hold. It lives in the future. It lives in the past. Again, worried about your survival and your security. Knowing that itself means anytime that your stress is generating, it's like, okay, look in a little bit closer. Where am I worried about the future? Where am I worried about the past? What can I do to come back to this present moment? And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail into that. For someone who's explored that spiritual side and that spiritual awakening, let's take the ego one step further. If you're somebody who believes and just absolutely holds on to the idea that, yes, you are a soul, you are a spirit, we think about your soulful self and how your soul is not bound by time. It is not bound by the physical body. It is that pure consciousness that can travel at the speed of light or faster. Your soul resides in realms and frequencies that is much higher than what we have here on earth. And so as a soul, wanting that growth, wanting all of the amazing expansive type learnings that you get from that soul's evolution, you can put your hand up and say, okay, I want to come in and have a human experience. What does that human experience give you? It gives you the experience of the ego, the mind. Coming into the human body, we have that ego. We are now bound by the scarcity or the limitation of time, the scarcity and the limitation of the 3D body. This is exciting to our soul. It's like, wow, what a different perspective. From our mind and from our human perspective, is like, what was I thinking coming into this body? But knowing that, this is where, if you're on your spiritual awakening, we are not on the path to collapse or the death of the ego or any of that. We are not after, the control or the upper hand of the ego. What we are after is coming back into that sacred neutral, not in the past, not in the future, not in the hate, not in the, whatever is the opposite, where our goal is actually to come back to that neutral point, that present moment, where we can observe the ego, we can observe how it drops our energy, we can observe the mental construct and the stuff that it generates that's not actually happening in this moment. And it gives your soul those aha moments about what is important to understand the limitations of what it is like to be in hate, anger, frustration, pain, depression, so that you can also know the higher frequencies of love, appreciation, healing, and that pure form of energy. It's a real refinement. When you start to raise your frequency, when the ego starts to loosen its grip on you, you start to question things like the cup's not actually half empty, cup's not actually half full. Does the cup exist? Again, that's a whole nother conversation for another day. But I want you to focus here that the ego will always tell you that the cup is half empty. Now, if you are somebody who is working through the struggles and the stress, I highly, highly, highly encourage you to check out the work of Byron Katie. Oh, amazing. She has dedicated her life to be able to help people understand struggle. And she has the 4 tools, or the work, I should say, to be able to question the ego. So let's say that you're struggling with a problem of like, oh, I can't do that because then people will judge me. My own struggles in the past was like, oh gosh, I can't do tarot. Like, what will people think of me? To put that out there, that's a bit woo-woo. And I had to work through that ego side of things where it's like, is it true that the tarot equals woo-woo and rejection? And the ego is going to go, yep, it is. Like, yep, the family says like the ego, tarot is weird and it, all of the judgments. Yes, the tarot, don't do the tarot. It's going to generate all sorts of rejection and criticism. That's the ego voice. Then the next question in Byron Katie's work is to say, okay, so is that belief really true? Like, if I do tarot or if I do this thing, I'm going to be rejected. Is that really true? And the ego, like a child having a tantrum, it's had its say. This is now where your intuition starts to light up and go, well, actually, I could start to draw in some like-minded spiritual people who think in a different way. So yeah, no, doing the tarot is not going to equal rejection. You can apply this to anything, by the way, whether it's wearing those brand clothes or, having the fancy car, whatever it is. But for me here with this example, let's go back to the tarot. The next question in Byron Katie's work is to say, okay, well, how do I feel when I believe the thought of the ego, that I'm going to be rejected doing something that I'm curious about? I was like, yeah, I don't feel so good about that. And then the next question here in Byron Katie's work is to ask yourself, well, how would I be, if I didn't have this thought? Like, what would I be doing? Where does that free up that space? Can't think off the top of my head now what the exact wording is of that 4th question. But you start to feel that release of like, okay, that's interesting, ego. Thank you for highlighting the potential problems. Now let's open the door to the potential possibilities of what magic it can create. And again, if you're struggling, then this is where you want to start to question where your ego is tugging on the threat to your individuality, the threat to your importance, the threat to your security. That's the ego. And that's a good thing to notice, because now you have the upper hand to step out of that, have the self-awareness, and to really build in the curiosity about where that's coming from. Is it true? And what can I do differently? So just having a quick look at my notes here. I'm really, really passionate about sharing with people how to step out of that stress, how to step out of that struggle, whether it's money issues, relationship issues, health issues, the more you stay hooked onto that stress, the more it is going to impact your health. You will feel it, right? You feel the anxiety. You feel when you get stuck in that limitation of anger, like headaches or back pain, female problems, knee pain. Anytime that you're generating or stuck in that loop of stress, your body is going to let you know. So this is where if you catch on to that stress pretty quick, then you can do something about it. If you ignore it, it's going to build up into big health problems, and that's where you have to do a whole lot of work to be able to resolve and dissolve it. So my last point here with the ego, the intention to step out of struggle, to step into that peaceful part of your mind. Take notice if you're thinking too much in the future, too much in the past, too much about needing security, too much about needing to matter, or too much about not wanting to be rejected. All of this need is the ego. And your higher self, your intuition, the present moment self knows how to naturally come back to that present moment, to observe, to come back into like, oh, that's a bit interesting, and then choosing a different way of focusing on what it is that you want to create. Again, you can definitely do the inner work to unpack the struggle and the strain of the past. You can unpack why your ego is putting stuff into the future and unpack where that's coming from. When you do that, that's where that's that pure integration. And it's like, okay, the ego can't use that as a way to control you. So you can definitely do the inner work, but just day-to-day life, have that self-awareness. I'm Claire Chancellor, and I love having these conversations with you. I look forward to the next one. Bye, guys.